Hello, everybody. Hello. Yeah, very good. So, like Mark, I'm going to talk in slightly more general terms rather than specifically about kind of case studies about outdoor and so on. And what I wanted to talk about was a topic that I think is literally dear to our hearts, and that's emotion and the power of emotion. I'll talk briefly about what neuroscience says about the importance of emotion, and also I'll share some, new tools that we may be able to use to measure emotion more effectively. And obviously we'll come back to talking about how we can apply that to outdoor as we go. So I think it's, I'm probably preaching to the choir with an audience like this in saying things like, emotions are absolutely crucial in marketing. I think we as an industry have known that instinctively for literally decades. But I think what's been interesting to me over the last few years in particular, as we've begun to look more into the kind of neuroscience space, is the increasing amount with which our clients and advertisers seem to actually start believing that. They've kind of always known that emotion's important, but there's now a kind of a genuine kind of acceptance that that's genuinely the case and that marketing needs to be more emotional than perhaps it has been in the past. And the science behind that is one of the reasons why I think that acceptance has come about. As we as an industry have begun to look more to the likes of neuroscience and behavioural economics, the science, the evidence for the role of emotion has become much more apparent to us all. And rather than kind of go through it in excruciating detail, I mean, the key finding, I think, for us all as marketers is, emotions are crucial because they play a key role in attention, they play a key role in memory, and they play a key role in decision-making. And those are all things that we as marketers seek to influence and seek to affect in the favour of our brands. Now, some of the detail behind that, and again, I won't go into loads and loads here, but some of the detail behind that is shown here. Firstly, one of the key reasons that emotion is important in marketing is because it's a real direction, it's a real director of our attention. So the brain is wired up to feel first and think second. Our ability to, if something is emotional and kind of it sparks an emotional response in us, we will pay attention to it, and that's kind of a key mechanism by which this works. Secondly, as a consequence, if we're paying attention, then we're more likely to remember. So in terms of generating long-term effects for brands, things that will carry forward in time, emotional marketing has a huge advantage, and I think we're beginning to kind of see the evidence for that emerging as we research this, the power of emotion more and more. Just to give you an illustration of the role of attention, of emotion in directing people's attention, I just want to share results of a quick experiment that we did looking at just two different images which had different levels of emotional content. We recruited a group of people, split them into two, showed each of them the same two images. One was an image of a train, one was an image of a forest. And we asked half the sample to just look at the picture of the train and ignore the picture of the forest. We asked the other half to look at the picture of the forest and ignore the picture of the train. Now, while we did this, we used eye-tracking technology to look at where they really looked when we presented these two bits of material. These are the results for the people who were asked to look at the train. Now, clearly you can see here that we've skewed the deck here somewhat. The picture of the forest is a simple, peaceful image. The picture of the train is a picture of a train accident. And the people who were asked to look at the train clearly all zeroed in on the train itself. The coloured blobs over the chart indicate the amount and length of fixation on the image itself. In contrast, though, I mean, obviously the people who were told to look at the train did as they were told. In contrast, the people who were asked to look at the forest, yes, most of them did look at the forest, do as they were told, but they could not help but look at the picture of the train as well. There was a significant number of people whose eyes were drawn to that because of the emotional power of that piece of imagery. So when we think about that in terms of the impact on advertising, creative, and posters and so on, the emotional power of the visual is enormously important, and it's an enormous key to the success in terms of driving people's eyeballs to a piece of work and generating the attention that will then facilitate the effectiveness of the campaign. The other reason, though, that emotion is important is because it has a fundamental impact on our decision-making and our reasoning. No marketing conference, I think, is complete these days without a speech about neuroscience, and that neuroscience speech must mention Antonio Damasio, so I'm going to do both. The scary picture of the skull is to illustrate a key case study that Antonio Damasio, one of the best-known neuroscientists who works in decision-making, uses all the time to illustrate the importance of emotion in decision-making. His research shows very clearly that if you lose the ability to understand the emotional consequences of your choices or the emotional benefits of the choices that you have to make, the decisions that you make become irrational. You make poorer choices if you don't know if something is emotionally valuable. So the case in point is that of Phineas Gage. Many of you, I'm sure, will have heard the story before. It has many versions and has done the rounds. But he was a railway worker in the 1800s who, while tamping down explosives, set off the explosives and accidentally blew the tamping rod through his head in the position that you can see there. He was surprisingly healthy afterwards. His intellect remained largely intact. But what was different about him, according to the case study evidence of the time, was that he began to make socially inappropriate decisions. He began to lose the ability to make socially sound choices. And the reason for that, according to Damasio, is that he'd lost the ability to understand the emotional consequences of his actions. The link between the emotional center of the brain, the limbic system, and the frontal lobes, where kind of executive decisions are taken, had been lost. So he really didn't understand whether something was emotionally good or bad, and ended up making a series of increasingly poorer and poorer life choices as a result. So the science behind this is extensive. You know, if we don't understand the emotional power of our choices, we can't make rational decisions. So as marketers, we clearly need to influence the emotional responses that we have to our brands, and clearly advertising and outdoor is a key channel to do that. So it's no surprise, for instance, that when we look at brands, we see there is a clear relationship between the emotional pull of a brand and its brand strength or brand equity. This is data taken from the Brand Z study that Millward Brown runs for our parent company, WPP, and has done so for many years. And you've got the vertical axis, you have the brand equity of thousands of brands taken earlier in the decade. And along the horizontal axis, we're looking at the emotional associations of those brands as measured not via straight question, but via projective techniques. So do people tend to describe the brand in positive or negative terms on an emotional level? And clearly you've got a massive relationship there. The brands that have the strongest equity are the ones that have the strongest emotional pull. So, you know, outside of the science here, we see all the time the importance of emotion in the brand work that we do. But what I would say is that we can't simply take a tack that says we need to give people positive emotional experiences and maybe brand that. That's not necessarily going to be the most powerful use of emotion in marketing. We have to ground that emotion somehow in the brand. And the reason for that is that while emotion is a key part of decision making, it isn't the only reason that we make a decision. So, you know, we're not all 3-year-olds. We're not all entirely ruled by our emotional responses. We can and sometimes do overrule those to make other choices. So we have to kind of temper our enthusiasm for emotion with some other things as well. And I think there's a key point here in that, you know, what seems on the surface to be a rational benefit is actually usually about an emotional reward. So we can't simply just say, let's make people feel good and they'll buy our brand. We have to somehow ground that in the brand. And, you know, the reason for that is we may not be rational. We may not be anything like as rational as we wish we were. But what we are is rationalizers. We will tell ourselves why we have made a choice, and that makes us feel better. I always argue that as an industry, we need to be making or allowing buyers to tell themselves the story of rational choice, to give people a reason that they can hang their choice on, even if that choice was based on their emotional responses and how they feel about what this brand will do for them. So that's the reason why we often see some of the best marketing that we monitor at Millward Brown works, because it illustrates the benefit of the brand, but in an emotionally positive way. It's not purely a piece of emotional storytelling. It's grounded in the brand, but it highlights the emotional benefits while also giving people a reason to hang that purchase on. And it's for that reason that we often find that the most successful sales strategy is not solely emotional, but it's a combination of emotion and rationality.